So thank you all very much for coming today. It was in 1977, November 14th, during Kartik Masa, on this day on the lunar calendar, not on the solar calendar, that His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada, disappeared from this world. And he had begun preaching the Krishna consciousness movement in 1965, having arrived in September 1965 in New York City. And he struggled for a while with no money and no followers. But eventually, through the help of one of the first real devotee in our movement, Mukunda Maharaj, got a storefront at 26 2nd Avenue in New York City and began holding kirtans and giving classes, and devotees began to come. And so he became successful in preaching the Krishna consciousness movement on the Lower East Side of New York, a place which was no picnic and no walk in the park. And to this day, we have this property in the possession of ISKCON, and they're carrying on with programs there on 2nd Avenue. In 1977, when I was a boy of 19 years old, or young man, I first visited the ISKCON temple in Dallas, Texas, located in the old East Grand neighborhood, which was basically a Mexican barrio. And that church was an old Baptist church that was no longer in use by the American congregation. And the devotees picked it up for a very good, cheap price. They're still in that same premise today. And I went to the Sunday feast, met the devotees, went to the kirtan, which was very ecstatic. And there they have very beautiful deities of Radha Kalachandji. Kalachandji is a very old deity of Krishna, purportedly from the Vrindavan area, a 500-year-old deity who's very large and was found by Srila Prabhupada's devotees in a museum in Jaipur, and Kalachandji was being used as a doorstop to hold open the door. And they convinced the proprietor to give them Kalachandji, and Prabhupada said, if you give me this deity, then I will bring Radharani. And so those deities were installed in 1972 in that old Baptist church on Gurley Avenue in the East Grand neighborhood of Dallas, Texas, which was about 50 miles from where I lived. And so I visited there and immediately became attracted to Krishna consciousness, finding the devotees wonderful, the philosophy wonderful, the prasad wonderful. They had some good cooks in the Dallas temple in those days. They especially had one devotee that made this really fabulous burfi. And he used to give me these chunks of burfi. It was like this big by this big. And that made me a devotee also, that burfi. Always grateful for that. Those devotees were very merciful. So practically, immediately, I became a follower of Srila Prabhupada and began to read his books. I had $20, and I said, so I want to get some books. I have $20. I was very poor, not living with my parents at home or anything, just surviving. So the devotee said, oh, very good. He took me to the book room, and he pulled out all the old beat-up books, which were not really sellable. They couldn't distribute those books. There, water damage and torn covers, and all the beat up old books that were lying neglected in the corner of the book room. And he gave me a big pile of books that I took home and began to voraciously read. The first book that I read was the Srimad Bhagavatam, 5th canto, description of the hellish planets and the punishments that one accrues from sinful activities. And I loved that book. I loved that book. And another book was the Ansha Leela of the Chaitanya Charitamrita, describing the passing of Srila Haridas Thakur. Very moving and wonderful, beautiful pastime, the relationship between Lord Chaitanya and Haridas. And those books captured me. And at the same time, I began chanting japa, and the devotee told me, just chant 4 rounds a day. So I chanted 4 rounds for a couple of days, and I said, that's not enough. Let me chant 8 rounds. Then I started chanting 8 rounds a day. A couple more days, I said, forget it. I got to chant 16 rounds a day because that's what you're supposed to do. Chant 16 rounds of japa every day. So immediately, I became a follower of His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada. Although I was just a foolish young boy, a college student, I used to play music professionally in these very horrible places. They have these bars in Texas, these country and western bars, and they're called honky-tonks. And the honky-tonks, the band plays, and then they have a concrete dance floor. And they would sprinkle Ajax, or Comet, all over the dance floor so that the cowboy boots would slide for the dancers on the floor. And they were very terrible places. Everyone completely absorbed in meat eating, intoxication, illicit sex, and if they had any spare money, they would gamble. But mostly they didn't have money for that. And it quickly dawned on me that this is so horrible, this is so nasty, that I have to get out of this life and take to the life of Krishna consciousness. And this was all the mercy of His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada. Just a personal testimony as to how Srila Prabhupada affected my life. And at that time, Srila Prabhupada was still on the planet, and he was the spiritual master of the Hare Krishna movement. And that was a long time ago, almost 50 years ago. But Srila Prabhupada is still the spiritual master of the Hare Krishna movement to this day. He is the Jagat Guru. He's the spiritual master of the whole world because he has done what no other acharya or spiritual teacher in the disciplic succession has done, and that he has spread Krishna consciousness all over the world. And now, all these years later, after Srila Prabhupada's disappearance, he is still preaching, and he is still the spiritual master. And now there are so many more temples than ever. I do not know the exact count of how many temples and schools, farms, restaurants, and projects there are in ISKCON, but it's a lot. Maybe as many as close to 1,000. Seems like every week there's a new temple in Delhi. They have 20, 25 temples, something like that. So this is all the work and the mercy of Srila Prabhupada. And when he first came to New York City in 1965, he had like 40 rupees in his pocket. But he also had his books. Sometimes devotees say he came with a few books, a couple of trunks of books. But actually he came with 200 sets of Srimad Bhagavatam, 3-volume sets, 600 books. he came with a lot of books. And and thus his movement began. And somehow or other, we are all very fortunate to have come in contact with Srila Prabhupada's Hare Krishna movement. And those of us who are Westerners have taken to this way of life, which is the true Vedic paradigm, the true Vedic way of life, which is to worship the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And in the Satya Yuga, people would meditate on Lord Vishnu for thousands and thousands and thousands of years because they lived a very long time. Kriteya Dhyayato Vishnu. That was the process of attaining self-realization. And then in the Treta Yuga, Tretayam Yajato Makai. They performed great sacrifices. And in this way were able to become purified and dedicate their lives to that service. Those great sacrifices were performed by great kings who had fabulous wealth and could spend the billions of dollars on grains and ghee and jewels and performing these wonderful sacrifices. And then it came to the Dwapara Yuga, in which Lord Krishna himself appeared at the very end of the Dwapara Yuga, around 3000 BC. And during the Dwapara Yuga, Tretayam Yajatomakai Dwapare Paricharjajam, that people engaged in the temple worship, the deity worship. And again, that deity worship was very fabulous and very opulent, like you still see in Tirupati in South India. But now more and more you see that in ISKCON, like in our temple in Amayapur, West Bengal, where the deity worship is extremely beautiful, extremely gorgeous, extremely opulent, and carried out by many, many, many Sevites, many devotees. And they have all wonderful, beautiful arrangements for flowers and dresses and puja according to the traditional Vedic methods. This was all instituted by Srila Prabhupada himself. But those days of the Dwapara Yuga are over, and Lord Krishna left this planet. Actually, while he was on the planet, the age of Kali began. But Kali could not manifest his nefarious activities because Krishna was still on the planet. But then after Krishna left the planet, Kali began to influence human society. But fortunately, Kalota Dhari Kirtanat, the same result that was gotten by meditation in the Satya Yuga, by sacrifices in the Treta Yuga, by deity worship in the Dwapara Yuga, is available, the same mercy, the same results, Kalota Dhari Kirtanat, by chanting Hare Krishna, by chanting the holy names of the Lord. And Srila Prabhupada has taken this chanting of the Maha Mantra and spread it all over the earth planet. So it is a very good time. Although Kali Yuga is the worst of times, simultaneously it is the best of times, because the Krishna consciousness movement is going forward, gaining momentum. So therefore, in the Bhagavatam, aside from the verse that we just quoted, there's another verse that states that Kaler Dosha Nidhe Rajan, this age of Kali, it is an ocean of faults. Normally we're used to seeing an ocean of water. And that ocean of water, it is very big, it is very powerful, right? Can you walk across the ocean? No. But imagine an ocean of faults, of bad qualities. Kaler Doshin Hey Rajan. Asyeko Mahanguna. But there is one great thing about this age. Mahanguna, one outstanding, fantastic quality. Kirtanad Eva Krishnasya Mukta Sangha Param Brajet. That one can go back home to Godhead. One can become free from all bad association. Mukta Sangha. Kirtanad Eva Krishnasya. Certainly, just by chanting the Hare Krishna mantra. And that is the mission of Srila Prabhupada, to spread this chanting of Hare Krishna all over the world. So while we are very sad that the great Acharya, the great spiritual master, Srila Prabhupada, is no longer physically present amongst us, and simultaneously we celebrate that he is still present amongst us by his instructions. And there's a quote from Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, the great 19th century and early 20th century preacher of Krishna consciousness, that he lives forever, the great devotee, by his preaching. And the followers who follow his instructions, they also live forever by this practice of the eternal Sanatan Dharma, which is the real secret understanding of all the Vedic Shastras. So Srila Prabhupada is not an ordinary spiritual master by any stretch of the imagination. The statement is given in there, spoken by many of you, of course, are Gujaratis. You will be happy to know this statement was spoken by Vallabhacharya, the founder of the Pushti Marg, and they have their temple there in Nathdwar. He has spoken this statement about Lord Chaitanya. It's an authorized statement. Kali Kalera Dharma Krishna Nam Sankirtan. That the religious principle, the Dharma of the Kali Yuga, is Krishna Nam Sankirtan, the congregational chanting of Hare Krishna. And Krishna Shakti Vina Nahi Tar Pravartana. No one can spread the Krishna consciousness movement unless he is specifically empowered by Lord Krishna, Krishna Shakti. So it is generally accepted amongst the followers of Srila Prabhupada, given the evidence of his work, his activities, and spreading Krishna consciousness all over the world, that that verse is spoken about him also. He obviously is imbued with Krishna Shakti to do what no one before him ever could do, and that's spread the chanting of Hare Krishna all over the world. Now, there's another statement that Lord Chaitanya says, that it will come to pass that, and someday my name will be chanted in every town and village of the world. And generally the Gaudiya Vaishnavas, before Srila Prabhupada, they did not understand this statement. Oh, perhaps it is allegory. It is a mysterious meaning. But then Srila Prabhupada did what was foretold by Lord Chaitanya, and he spread the chanting of the holy names to every town and village of the world. Just like the prediction was made 500 years ago. How did he do that? How was he able to accomplish what was predicted by Lord Chaitanya himself? Krishna Shakti Vina Nahi Tar Pavartana. Because he is empowered by Krishna. Now I'll tell you a couple of stories from disciples of Srila Prabhupada that relate something of his glory. In the early days in 1966 in New York City, the devotees, Srila Prabhupada was friends with a, what was his name, Dr. Mishra? Yeah. And he had a little country retreat upstate from New York City called Ananda Ashram. And before Srila Prabhupada had any followers, he had been there. And Prabhupada was living in a windowless room in an office building, not far away from Dr. Mishra's opulent Upper West Side New York City apartment. He was what they call an uptown Swami, with rich people as his followers. And of course, naturally, he was a Mayavadi. But he got to be friends with Srila Prabhupada, and Srila Prabhupada would walk every day from his small windowless office to Dr. Mishra's yoga studio and apartment, and he would cook. He would make rice, dal, sabji, and chapatis for Dr. Mishra. And Dr. Mishra is quoted as saying that Swamiji, he really knocked me out with love. He would come and he would cook, and he would say, Mishra, get up. It is time to take prasad. And Mishra was suffering some health issues, and that by that taking of the prasad that Srila Prabhupada was making, nice, fresh, hot prasad, imagine getting prasad cooked by the hand of Srila Prabhupada, a pure devotee of Krishna, a very potent, powerful prasadam. Wouldn't we all like to get some of that? And he became much improved in his health. And Srila Prabhupada was very regulated. Every day he would cook and have that prasadam ready at lunchtime. But sometimes they would argue. Mishra was holding classes and Prabhupada was there. And Prabhupada would argue with him. Why are you teaching this Mayavadi philosophy? You are such a rascal. Sometimes they would even be shouting and yelling at one another vociferously. And then afterwards they would be friends again. So when Prabhupada began to have some success and get his own followers, he was invited to bring the devotees from New York City up to the Ananda Ashram. And one of the devotees, Hayagriva Das, who was a very intelligent person, he was an English professor. He actually taught at Ohio State University, where they started a preaching program there. And Srila Prabhupada went there, and they had 1,000 students chanting, dancing, clapping in a big hall. Anyway, they had a house there, but there wasn't room for all the devotees in the house. And there was a little lake on the property, so the devotees slept along the banks of the lake. It was in the summertime. And Hayagriva had a dream that night. And then he told Srila Prabhupada about his dream. He said, Prabhupada, I had this dream, and there was this beautiful, effulgent, golden youth. And everyone was surrounding him. And he was the center of all attention. And then when I got close, I realized, Srila Prabhupada, that was you. But you don't appear like that to us now. You're an elderly Bengali gentleman, 70 years of age. He said, how am I to understand this? And Prabhupada said, if I appeared like that in my original spiritual form, then people would follow me for my beauty and not for my teachings. So he came as an elderly Indian gentleman, but bringing the wonderful teachings of Krishna consciousness. And this was a realization that Hayagriva had, that he reported to the devotees, and it was noted down. Very wonderful dream. Because Srila Prabhupada is that golden, effulgent, eternal spiritual youth. And he was not an old man from Calcutta that we think of in the material sense. So that is one account. And there's another devotee, Bhavananda, who was one of the original pillars of the Mayapur community in Bengal. He was talking with Srila Prabhupada in Prabhupada's quarters there in Mayapur. And Prabhupada, casually talking in his room with a few devotees, was a little different than the formal giving of the lectures and etc. And Prabhupada told him, yes, I was with Krishna in the spiritual world. And Krishna told me, I want you to go down, means here, to the material world, where we are so habituated to live. I want you to go down and preach to the fallen souls of Kali Yuga. And Srila Prabhupada said, but Krishna, I don't want to go down there. There is so much Maya. And then I have to do so many austerities. And in the spiritual world, everyone is naturally enjoying serving Krishna in full love with eternal knowledge, beauty, bliss, eternal existence. There's no question of growing old and suffering and disease and all the normal facets of our material life that we experience. And Krishna said, oh, you don't have to do any austerities. This is Prabhupada speaking to his disciple. Krishna said, you don't have to do any austerities. You just go down and write the books. So Srila Prabhupada wrote the books for all human society. This he considered his most important work. How did Srila Prabhupada write so many books? Well, when everyone else was sleeping, Srila Prabhupada, he would go to bed about 10:30 at night, maybe 11 o'clock. Then he would get up at 1 o'clock. No alarm clock, no nothing, no electronic device, no cell phone. I use my Google phone for the alarm clock, otherwise I'd never get up. And he would dictate on a Grundig dictating machine his books. He would translate the Sanskrit. He had a big book of commentaries, of the major commentaries of the Acharyas. And there are like 11 major commentators on Srimad Bhagavatam. And he would translate the verse, then he would read through the commentaries, the 11 commentaries of the principal Acharyas, and then he would compose his own commentary based on those commentaries. And he would do that every night for several hours while all the devotees and the rest of the world was asleep. He's translating his books. That's how he found the time to write his books. He didn't sleep, but only a couple hours a night. Otherwise, he was translating. And so he did this for many years and was able to complete the Srimad Bhagavatam up to the 10th canto, chapter 13. And his disciples finished the rest of the Bhagavatam. And he also paused his Bhagavatam commentary to give the translation and commentary of Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, as well as Nectar Devotion and the Krishna book, which is a summary study of the 90 chapters of the 10th canto of the Bhagavatam. He did all this while in his 70s, in the middle of the night, while everyone else was sleeping. This is our Srila Prabhupada, doing what Krishna told him. You just write the books. And then when Prabhupada said that, and he looked with big eyes at his disciple, and his disciple was completely blown away, and later gave an account of this. So this is who Srila Prabhupada is. Obviously, he's well acquainted with Krishna and the spiritual world. One time, Srila Prabhupada was asked by a devotee, Srila Prabhupada, exactly who are you in the spiritual world? Prabhupada smiled, and he said, if I told you, you wouldn't believe me. So, Srila Prabhupada had a great sense of humor also, very humorous. One devotee who was his secretary for a few years, Shama Sundar Das, has said, Srila Prabhupada was always cracking us up. He was so funny, so humorous. He saw the foibles of human psychology and was able to make light and point out different things. I'll give you an example of that. Srila Prabhupada was in London in 1969, and then when the American astronauts supposedly, quote, landed on the moon, And they even brought a TV into Prabhupada's room to show him the live broadcast. And there was one devotee, his servant, Purushottama, who was really fired up about man going to the moon. He was really into science, and he was fired. Look at this. There, look at that. Pictures from the moon. Prabhupada was unimpressed. Then they were staying a little while later at the estate of John Lennon of the Beatles fame, and he had offered his use of some of his facilities. He had a big estate, Tittenhurst it was called, for the devotees to use if they would help him renovate the old mansion, which was an old British lord and lady mansion that's, probably a couple hundred years old, something like that. So they're staying in one outbuilding, the servants' quarters. And Prabhupada's cook, Jamuna Devi, there was some problem with the stove, and there was a fire, and there was this smoke. And then she called out, Purushottama, Prabhupada's science-loving servant. Come help me, quick, quick. And Purushottama ran in there, and they put out the fire, and he was all covered with soot. And they went into Prabhupada's room. Prabhupada, what happened? Oh, there was a fire, Prabhupada. We had to put out the fire. And then Prabhupada saw Purushottama all covered with soot, his clothes also. And Prabhupada said, look, Purushottama has gone to the moon. Purushottama was crushed, of course, because Prabhupada was making fun of his attachment. Later, Prabhupada said, they may have gone somewhere, but they did not go to the moon, because you cannot go to the moon unless you're qualified by consciousness, by punya. You can go, not in this body. You can go in your next life by performing austerities and pious activities. That's possible. However, in today's day and age, not very likely. And then, so they went to the moon. Well, that was a long time ago. Why didn't they keep going? Why don't they go back? What is that? Why is that? They could do that in 1969, and now they can't do it? Very interesting. And Prabhupada said they went to the moon, the heavenly planet, and they brought back some rocks? Are you kidding me? And why didn't they go back? Why are they not going regularly? Who has the answer? So anyway, this controversy is there. What Prabhupada said, Purushottama has gone to the moon. Making fun of his disciples' attachment to the moon planet. But you can go there. Prabhupada has written one book, Easy Journey to Other Planets, in which he describes how you can go to the higher planets through yogic practice and performance of austerities and pious activities. But who can do that now? Let's just do the austerity of following the 4 regulative principles that Srila Prabhupada has taught us. No meat eating, no intoxication, no illicit sex, no gambling. Simple. Did I say it was easy? For those who are accustomed and trained in Krishna consciousness, yes, it is very easy. And for those who are otherwise habituated, they have to become purified. But it is possible by chanting of the holy names. Follow the 4 regulative principles, chant 16 rounds every day, and find some way to become involved with the Krishna consciousness movement and render devotional service for the pleasure of Srila Prabhupada and to assist Srila Prabhupada. We say Srila Prabhupada spread Krishna consciousness all over the world single-handedly, but he had the help of his young disciples also, who did a lot of the legwork under Srila Prabhupada's direction. So it is an opportunity, the Krishna conscious movement, for all of us, every one of us, man, woman, child, American, Indian, Latino, whatever is your bodily designation, to render devotional service and assist Srila Prabhupada by participating in his Hare Krishna movement. And this is the glory of Srila Prabhupada, that this opportunity is available for everyone, anyone and everyone. Should we choose to take it up, it is up to us. Sometimes people say, oh, we've heard this before. I will become Krishna conscious when Krishna wants me to. Say, no, you rascal. You will become Krishna conscious when you get up off your duff and you follow the practices of Krishna consciousness and chant your rounds and make it your priority in life to become a devotee of Krishna. And follow Krishna's instructions that are right there in Bhagavad Gita. Manmana, always think of me. Bhava mad bhakto, become my devotee. Maj jaji mam namaskaru, worship me, offer your obeisances to me. In this way, surely you will come to me. And that is the goal of our life, is to go back home, back to Krishna. As Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, 4th chapter, that Janma karma chame divyam, those who know my transcendental nature of my janma, my appearance, and my karma, my work, my activities, to such a person who understands these things, evam yoveti tattvataha, factually, in truth, one who hears this message of Bhagavad Gita and puts it to work in his life, then he will understand Krishna in truth. And then, Chaktva deham purnar janma. No more purnar janma, no more birth. And no more birth means what? No more death. If you're not taking birth, then you will not have to die. Naiti mameti sorjana, but rather you will go back to Krishna. And there in the spiritual world, there is no birth and death. Life is eternal. And one is fully cognizant of Krishna. One has full understanding, full realization of all the truths of Vedic knowledge. And one is very happy. There is so much anxiety in this world. But in the spiritual world, there is nothing like that. Therefore, the spiritual planets are referred to as Vaikunta. Vaikunta means free from anxiety. What does it mean to be free from anxiety? No mortgage, no car payment, no car insurance, no taxes, no getting your benefit taken away by the federal government, no demons in charge, no struggle for existence, no family members who drive you crazy and you can't do anything about it because what? They're already your family. But the spiritual family of Krishna, everyone is happy together. There is no competition and there is no envy. No one is envious of anyone else. Everyone is very happy to be in everyone else's association because everyone is doing what? Serving Krishna. All right. Thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Would there be any brief question or comment from anyone? Of course, this is what we call preaching to the choir. When I was a kid, we go to church and there's the choir, and the preacher's preaching, and the choir's right there and they're hearing everything. Well, they've already accepted everything. You don't have to convince them of anything. They're card-carrying members. Yes, we accept. So this is preaching to the choir. Everyone here is a devotee. This is the Sangha of devotees here in Tucson. So we all accept already everything. And of course, many of you are of Indian origin and you've already accepted this Krishna consciousness as part of your family tradition and cultural traditions for a long time, generations, eons even. All right, thank you very much. Hare Krishna.